know what you're thinking. Where is she from? Well, so far I've gotten Russian, Portuguese, Indian, African, Persian, and Pakistani. But I have a better description of where I'm from. My family is that family that walks into the airport and the security people go, "Ugh." But then we show them our American passports and they say, "Oh, America, Obama, come, come." As you can imagine, airports are a tricky place for my family. We've even been asked to refrain from speaking our native language, as it may seem like a threat to some people. The airport security has incorporated some more random full body scans during security checks. I told my dad, "You must be a really lucky guy. You always get to have full body scans." My dad just sighs and says, "They're just doing their job." In the UK, those from ethnic minorities are up to 42 times more likely than white people to be stopped by the police during a security check. As someone who is seen as an ethnic minority in this situation, I find these numbers quite startling. After all, why are ethnic minorities, or people who look like my dad, stopped so frequently? The answer didn't become clear until I realized that everywhere I looked, there was always one religion plastered on most headlines. These headlines included Islam or Muslims. However, these headlines wouldn't be about the peaceful Muslims. They'd be about the extremists that were taking lives. As I became more exposed to these reports, I wondered how the peaceful religion that my parents taught me could be portrayed in such a violent manner. It was even more shocking for me to see countless tweets or comments on Facebook by people that were convinced that all Muslims were terrorists. I wondered, what caused them to believe this way? After all, can you judge an entire religion based on a small group of people? It wasn't until I was in Australia a few months ago when I realized why so many people have this opinion. I was watching the news with my family. Suddenly, there was a breaking news report about the shooting in Ottawa. Someone had run into Parliament Hill and opened fire. They said 3 things about this shooter. He is a male, he is in his early 30s, and he converted to Islam 2 years ago. I remember thinking, why was that relevant? Why was it necessary to include his religion? After this report, there was one right after about a boy in Washington who had brought a gun to his high school. During the entire report, they never mentioned his religion. No one said, "This boy was born and raised a Christian." They simply said he had been in a very emotional state that day, and they didn't bother going into more detail. Even now, no one knows why he did it. But what I know for certain is that no one judged his entire religion based on his actions. According to global research, more than 90% of all terrorist attacks on US soil had been carried out by non-Muslims. Yet, somehow, radical people who happen to be Muslim seem to be the only ones making the headlines. It is as if the media is trying to convince us that we should never blame a religion for any of these crimes. But if there were a religion to blame, it would have to be Islam. Just look at how violent these people are. They shoot, they bomb, and they kill. The media will never tell you about the many contributions we've made to different fields. Just once, I would love for someone to come up to me and ask, "Hey, didn't Muslims invent coffee?" Or, "Hey, I didn't know Muslims created algebra." Instead, I hear questions like, "Why aren't Muslims condemning ISIS?" The fact is, Muslims everywhere are condemning ISIS. These supposed Muslims in ISIS that have misinterpreted the Quran are less than 1% of the entire Muslim population. The rest of the population is condemning them. The Muslim Public Affairs Council, the Islamic Society of North America, the Muslim Council of Great Britain, and countless other groups of Muslims. They all had the same message. Violence has no part in religion. The media just won't portray it. The US regime has killed over 20 million people since World War II. Christianity is never categorized as a violent religion, yet somehow Islam is. At what point did the world begin judging a religion of 1.6 billion people based on a small group's actions? Islam is the fastest growing religion on earth. If it truly promoted violence, this earth wouldn't have survived this long. As humans, we've gotten too comfortable having enemies. We have always needed a group to dislike. Whites once hated blacks. It took more than 500,000 people to die in the Civil War for Americans to realize that blacks were people, not property. Men once refused to see women as equals. It wasn't until 1920 when women in America were finally given the right to vote. It took the US 144 years to realize that women were equal to men. I don't want to wait 144 years to see change. I don't want to hear about 500,000 people that had to die in order for a lesson to be learned. I don't want to walk into airports and have people look at my family like we've done something wrong just by being there. I don't want to have to clarify that I'm not a terrorist every time I mention my religion. The time for people to understand is not next week or next year or someday. We cannot afford to be ignorant anymore. The time to change is right now. It is time we restore the media back to its original purpose, spreading news, not hatred. We need to stop them from making a whole religion seem like the culprit. You have the power and all the tools to educate people with every bit of information you have. With tenacity, we will change the minds of people. With integrity, we will shut away our prejudices. Now I know what you're thinking. She still hasn't told us where she's from. Whether I am Indian or Pakistani or Persian, it should make no difference as to how I am treated. Remember, when we use a broad brush to paint others, we splatter ourselves with ignorance. I don't want to live in a world filled with ignorance anymore. The question is, do you?